One of the most annoying things about the internet is you go searching for a solution, you find someone else who has the same problem as you do, but they never explain how or even if they were able to fix it. A couple years back, I shared out a video on YouTube documenting a gnarly ticking sound that my 2012 Mercedes GL350 was making. And I had a couple comments asking if I'd ever found the cause of the problem, but I didn't get around to making any teardown videos or anything else. Just to recap, when my GL350 hit about 125,000 miles, it very suddenly started making a really bad ticking sound. And trying to isolate it, I looked at the timing chain and the valve train, but was really unable to identify the source. After throwing in the towel, I shipped it off to the local Mercedes dealer for diagnosis. They had a little bit of comedy around that. The dealer managed to, first they lost the truck and then they lost the key, but in the end, the result was a diagnosis of, quote, something in the bottom end, with the solution being to replace the engine at the low cost of only $21,000. Thinking that maybe I was just getting a go-away quote from the dealer, I had the truck towed over to the local Indy Mercedes mechanic. Again, it was, something let loose in the bottom end, but this time the guy there, he told me a used engine wasn't really an option because there's no such thing as a good used OM642. The only option was a new engine from Mercedes, which was a bargain at the independent shop for only $20,000, a 5% savings, woohoo. Well, after hearing that, I decided just to part the stupid thing out, cut up the shell, and so I had it towed back to my workshop after a little while, and I kind of just sat on it for a while, and unsure really what to do with it. About a year and a half went by. I sold off a couple parts, just couldn't really bring myself to go whole hog on the part out effort, and I just didn't really want the stupid thing to beat me. So last year, summer of 2020, I decided well, I was going to part it out or fix it. I was going to have to tear into the engine. So that's all I did. I decided if it was too thrashed to save, I'd continue with the part out effort. But if it was fixable with a reasonable amount of machine shop work, I'd get the beast back on the road. The teardown commenced, and inside I found these. The number 2 rod bearing was completely thrashed. This is obviously the big end. There's no flange that's supposed to be on that rod bearing. It's supposed to be smooth. It was destroyed. Obviously, a lack of lubrication there on the number 2 cylinder caused this bearing to fail. I found pieces of it all through the engine. It came off in pieces there. The rest of the bearings weren't terrible, although they were certainly more worn than you would expect a 125,000 mile diesel engine to be, but at least they came out whole and not in pieces. With that rod bearing being loose, it definitely allowed the piston to move a little too much. You can actually see here the imprint of the exhaust valves on the piston itself. So definitely getting too much travel, and that's where the ticking noise was coming from, and why that ticking noise was at half engine speed, because it was only happening on the exhaust valves as the piston came up. The journals on the crankshaft were damaged as well. It was scored pretty badly to the point where it actually required the crankshaft to be machined to the point where there was more material put on and then ground back down. So my new crankshaft's back. It has my initials etched into it, which is kind of cool. And this crankshaft is all turned down with some new material added, nice and shiny, and all those journals just absolutely perfect now. So all ready to go back into the car at this point. Once I got the crankshaft back, I decided to go ahead and start cleaning the block up. So I've got the block right here. The gasket surface of the oil pan is all cleaned out and ready for ready to have the new gasket mated to it and everything. You can see inside the bearings are still in place, or at least the top half of the shell is still there. The bottom half look the same, but you can see how worn those are on the mains. Way, way, way more than I would expect from a 125,000 mile engine. And it's a little hard to see from this video, but there was also a lot of sludged up oil, carbonized oil basically, that was jammed into some of these little crevices in there as well. So definitely lack of lubrication and stuff floating around in there. If we go ahead and pull one of those bearings out, you can see the amount of wear that's on that thing. I mean, it strikes me how worn this is, given that it's only 125,000 miles and the fact it's a diesel. Really kind of attribute that to the lack of lubrication, the soot that gets put in there. And speaking of soot, you can see right here, it's a little hard to see, but you've got this this little notch, and in there it's collected a bunch of garbage, sludged up oil and stuff, and that was all through the engine. So flipping it over, we have the top side. You got the oil cooler up there. That's going to come off. We'll put new seals into there and get it all cleaned up and cleaned out so that there's no sludge buildup there. And we got to clean up the deck. It's in okay shape, no notches or anything like that, but it does need to be cleaned up. And I've already started cleaning the front cover of the engine off, so we can get that all sealed up as well. All right, so where do we go next? This is, I guess, the part 2 of I don't know how many video. But the next steps are going to be getting this engine rebuilt and put back in and off to the races. I've ordered the bearings and bolts and all of that to get the bottom end put back together, and when those parts come in, I'll go ahead and get started with this. I do want to get the block cleaned off, and just so it's looking nice and pretty. The motor mounts need to be replaced, and there's a few other things that'll kind of go while I'm in there, as it were. So follow along. I'll keep updating as I make some progress with this, and hopefully we'll have a little more detail on how, and I don't know if it'll be the right way, but at least it'll be a way to do a rebuild on the OM642.